Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. The Anomaly, TensuraXDate Alive, by Humpzwas Chapter 6, Misunderstanding. Rimuru Pav. Currently, Rimuru and Shidu are slowly moving further out from the city. The evening sun casts long shadows on the ground. The sky was ablaze with the fire of the setting sun, and Rimuru began to wonder where she would choose to rest tonight. While Rimuru wasn't paying attention, a small black cloud escaped from behind her, unnoticed by anyone, including herself. Rimuru felt something, so she turned around and checked but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Rimuru checked through universal perception, and again, she didn't feel anything out of the ordinary. The airship less than Fraxinus greater than was still overhead, and the people were still moving around. Noticing nothing unusual, Rimuru still had a weird feeling, so she asked Seal. Less than hey Seal, have you noticed anything unusual going on? Greater than? Less than not at all, Master. Greater than less than, is that so? I just had a very strange feeling. Greater than. Less than, it's just your imagination. Greater than less than, that seems to be the case. Greater than. Shidu saw Rimuru looked like she was looking for something, so he asked. What's wrong? Rimuru looked at Shidu and showed a wry smile as she realized that she had just acted strangely on the street. Oh, it's nothing, don't mind me. Shidu heard her answer and didn't ask any more questions. Rimuru sighed and continued looking at her surroundings. The further away from the city, the fewer people passed by, but Rimuru didn't care too much about that. Being looked at by a bunch of strangers is not a pleasant feeling anyway. And after a while, the place they were heading towards was in front of them. A park on a hill. Rimuru didn't understand why Shidu led her to this place but continued to follow. Go up the long stair on the hill to reach the park above. Rimuru felt quite surprised that the spiritual power was able to strengthen and increase her physical, making her body not tired after all this walk. Normally, her human body is very weak, if not pathetically weak, when the body doesn't have that much muscle after all. But thanks to spiritual power, Rimuru can now enjoy using the human body more comfortably. Once she had gone higher, Rimuru tried looking at the city. It was already afternoon, the sun was slowly setting and dyeing a large part of the city a pale orange. In front of Rimuru now is a modern city with houses and shops, not a place destroyed by any space quake, as she had first seen. She couldn't help but be surprised that the damage she had caused to the city was repaired in just a few days. Amazing. They were able to rebuild the city in such a short time, said Rimuru with a somewhat surprised expression. The Shidu next to her heard that and also spoke up. The government has a team that specializes in repairing damage caused by spacequakes and spirits. So the repair process was completed fairly quickly. Rimuru agreed. With such advanced technology, overcoming the effects of a space quake and the spirits could be described as simple. That's quite interesting, said Rimuru while continuing to walk up the stairs. At this moment, Rimuru noticed that the surroundings were strangely deserted, but didn't care much about it. Instead, what caught Rimuru's attention more was a group of fully armed individuals scattered throughout the area. Based on what Rimuru recognized, some of them were present in the battle between the Ast group and Rimuru last time. Rimuru wasn't sure how they knew she was here, nor was it clear if they were ready to attack. Right now, Rimuru doesn't use her angels or astral dresses, so the amount of spiritual power released will be close to zero, so it's unlikely they can find Rimuru by tracking her spiritual power. Rimuru thought and looked at Shidu. He was walking next to Rimuru and didn't seem to have any bad intentions. But was he leading her to a deserted area to ambush and attack? Even though she thought about that possibility, Rimuru quickly denied that thought. Shidu would have no reason to take the risk and directly confront Rimuru. And at the same time, Rimuru didn't think that the less than Ratatosker organization would be stupid enough to attack her after seeing the display of power from the previous attacks. But in case something unusual happened, Seal would definitely find out and notify Rimuru immediately, so she was somewhat relieved. Put aside the stressful thoughts and continue walking, even though Rimuru herself was having unpleasant feelings about being surrounded by people who might attack. And after a while, they finally reached the park. Once they reached the place, Shidu looked toward the direction of the city below. Although he had walked for a long time, he did not feel tired, and he felt very grateful for that. And Shidu felt that his hard work was well worth it. Up here is a large area lined with bricks and trees along the side of the road. Here he could see the whole street. He could even see his neighborhood from an angle he rarely saw. At the side, Rimuru also looked down at the scenery below the city and spoke up. "It's pretty, so is this what you want? View of the city from this place?" Rimuru said while looking towards the city with a satisfied smile. When Shidu saw that, he only smiled slightly back and nodded. The reason he hadn't started a conversation up until now was that he wasn't good at it without the help of the Ratatosker. He was always trying to come up with something to ask Rimuru. But he was afraid that his question would be inappropriate. Rimuru always gave Shidu a nervous feeling he never felt before, even with the other spirits he had sealed. Not sure why, but Rimuru just feels different from the other spirits. Maybe it's the way she acts or speaks. She still hasn't opened up to Shidu yet. After the two kept silent and looked at the city for a while, Rimuru suddenly spoke up. "That's enough sightseeing. Can we talk now?" Surprised by Rimuru's sudden question, Shidu looked at her. Rimuru's face has now lost the smile from earlier. She now had a serious face as she looked at him. Shidu felt like Rimuru's attitude had changed dramatically, even though he didn't know what Rimuru's current mood bar was. But he could guess that she was feeling uncomfortable. For some reason, but Shidu didn't do anything. Ratatosker also just observed and did not interfere in these matters, so Shidu did not understand the reason for Rimuru's change of attitude towards him. Her cold gaze made Shidu feel even tenser. "What do you want to talk about?" Shidu asked Rimuru again while trying to hide his nervousness. Rimuru, who was still looking at him with an almost expressionless face, opened her mouth and spoke. "Why did you bring me here?" Hearing Rimuru's question, Shidu was silent for a while to find an answer. The decision to bring Rimuru to this place was not his own, but Ratatosker's decision. But Shidu couldn't say he took her here just because of Ratatosker's instructions. Wrecking his brain to find some excuse, but found nothing. Shidu clenched his fist and opened his mouth, relying on his emotion. "I took you here just to help you relax. Sometimes you need to have a bit of fun, right?" Shidu said with a wry smile. He tried looking at Rimuru's expression after he said that to her. Rimuru looked like she was surprised, but at the same time, she was trying to confirm his words. After a while, Rimuru sighed and said, "Okay, I'll trust you. For now," Rimuru said with a less serious tone. Shidu also felt relieved when he saw Rimuru had returned to her original attitude. He breathed out softly and spoke up. "Shall we find somewhere to sit for a bit?" "Okay." Katori looked up at the control screen with a somewhat annoyed face. Rimuru was harder to conquer than Katori thought. She barely opens her heart and rarely talks to Shidu during the trip. Just a moment ago, her mood bar suddenly dropped without any reason, and after listening to Shidu's answer, it went back to normal again. All the static can only tell that Rimuru is wary of something. Katori doesn't understand what's inside her head anymore. Her alertness makes Katori feel like choosing the safe option was a good choice. Although spirits are usually alert to their surroundings, not to this extent. Is something troubling her? While Katori was thinking, suddenly Rain, beside her, spoke up. "I'm going to analyze the new data we got from this encounter." Hearing Rain's words, Katori looked over at her and nodded. "Okay, tell me if there's any useful information about this spirit." Rain nodded and slowly went out of the control room. Watching Rain walk away, looking like she could collapse at any moment, Katori sighed and turned back to the monitor screen. All information was encrypted for information security reasons, only Rain can read them. And now, any new information about Rimuru, her hobby, what she likes and dislikes, is all important. There was no friendliness or love in Rimuru's eyes. She seemed to only see Shidu as a person that she has to meet. And Katori has to change that. Rimuru Pav. Currently, Rimuru and Shidu were resting on a bench, even though they weren't tired. Rimuru looked over at Shidu, who seemed to be quite tense, an attitude that someone who has to deal with spirits like him shouldn't have. There was no hostility Rimuru could feel from him, but still, something about him was putting Rimuru on guard. But when she first met Shido, there was spiritual energy detected in his body, and Seal confirmed it. However, right now, she cannot see any abnormalities on Shido's body. He doesn't have any skills, or he doesn't even possess the thing that turned Rimuru's current body into a spirit. If searching from the outside didn't work, worst case, Rimuru might have to absorb him for Seal to analyze. But Rimuru doesn't want to do that, so it's best to get Shido to tell Rimuru himself. "Hey Shido, are you a spirit?" Rimuru suddenly asked and looked at him without blinking, not expecting Shido's answer. It would be foolish to trust someone you just met not long ago. After hearing Rimuru's question, Shido made a surprised expression and looked at her. "Why, do you? When I first met you, you were emitting spiritual energy and healing, isn't that the ability of a spirit?" Hearing her words, Shido was silent for a while. After a while, he opened his mouth to speak. "I'm not a spirit, I'm a human." "Or at least I believe so," Shido said, mumbling at the end. Shido is currently averting his face and trying to avoid her gaze, which makes Rimuru feel that something is not right. After a while, Shido also looked back at Rimuru. His eyes lacked confidence, but he continued to speak. "As for the spiritual energy, it is the spiritual power of the spirits that I have sealed. Less than seal. Greater than. Rimuru immediately asked Seal to confirm Shido's words. Less than. No sign of lying from individual Shido detected. Greater than. Hearing Ciel's confirmation, Rimuru sighed and looked at Shido. He seemed to be waiting for a response from Rimuru. Rimuru observed him once more. His body is nothing special, but somehow he can seal spiritual energy into his body. Then how did you seal the spiritual energy of the spirits into you? Right after that, Shido opened his eyes wide and fell into a state of complete panic. That's. Shido stammered as he looked like he was having a hard time trying to explain. Is it something secret? Rimuru asked, seeing his troubled expression. Oh no, it's not. It's just. Shido spoke and then paused for a moment. You could say so, Shido said in a voice that sounded like he had given up on persuasion otherwise. Hearing this, Rimuru only smiled lightly with a teasing expression. She knew that organizations would usually have their secrets, but the way Shido handled matters was like a child afraid of being exposed, and that made Rimuru feel somewhat funny. Shido seemed to have also noticed Rimuru smiling at him, but instead of annoyance he just stared at her. He didn't look annoyed at being teased by Rimuru, but it looked like he was feeling happier. Ignoring Shido's expression, Rimuru tried to check what was going on around her as a safety measure, and she realized. The number of people surrounding Rimuru has now increased. This is not a defensive measure but more like an ambush. She doesn't think Shido and the people surrounding her are a real threat and doesn't think that Ratatosker would be stupid enough to attack her. But then Ciel's voice came into Rimuru's head. Less than warning. Master, you need to stay away from individual Shido now. Greater than. Ciel Pav. A few minutes ago, Rimuru-sama is still thinking that she's not capable of defeating the spirit named Mio Takamiya. And now, while Lord Rimuru was busy looking around, Ciel secretly formed a clone body that she could control. Everything happened undetected by Rimuru-sama. The body created by Ciel was so weak that it was almost no different from a normal human and could easily be destroyed. Lord Rimuru's current body wasn't her actual body, so the amount of mana Ciel can use is barely enough to make a clone. But what Ciel needed here was the information about spiritual energy and the sealing process that was mentioned. The reason Ciel chose this world in the first place was just because of this energy source. Spirit shouldn't exist in this world, but somehow it did and does exist. The way they work is somewhat special, they don't work like magic or any other kind of energy that Ciel has ever encountered. The spirit abilities that Lord Rimuru possessed were contained within the crystal called Saphira, not the soul. They possess a relatively strong ability to manipulate reality despite being limited by many factors. For a lot of reasons, Ciel thinks that this energy can do more than this. Despite the lack of information, Ciel was assured that no entity could cause significant harm to Lord Rimuru. But it was also due to the lack of information about this energy that Rimuru-sama could easily believe that she was currently in a disadvantageous position. And now, Seal was supporting Rimuru-sama while controlling the clone body to infiltrate the less than Fraxinus greater than ship easily without being detected. Standing on an empty street corner, the body that Seal was controlling kept an expressionless face and looked up at the sky with bright red eyes. A ship named Fraxinus was observing Rimuru-sama while remaining invisible in the sky. But still, the invisible layer can't do anything against Seal to prevent her from seeing them. At this moment, Seal finished calculating the coordinates and teleported straight into the ship's data center. Without saying anything, Ciel's figure disappeared. Standing in a room covered in metal, Seal stood facing a console connected to the ship. Slowly walking to the screen in front, Seal placed her hand on it and began to analyze it. At that moment, a voice rang out behind Seal. That voice came from someone that Seal would surely intervene if anything unusual happened. Mio Takamiya. She currently surrounds herself with some sort of mosaic to hide her identity, but that wasn't enough to fool Seal and is standing behind her. Looks like there's someone who shouldn't be here. Seal didn't turn around or answer, she just stood still and showed no emotion. Won't you talk? Just like last time, Seal doesn't show any emotion or interact with her. I was going to ask you something but it seems you won't answer so. Die. After Mio Takamiya's words, she raised her hand towards Seal. Instantly, from her palm, a laser shot straight through Ciel's body. Ciel's body instantly turned into black smoke and vanished. Seal now no longer cares about Mio Takamiya or her destroyed clone. Because there's something else. An extremely important information that Seal had just obtained when copying all the data in the Fraxinus. They're planning to have Shido kiss Rimuru-sama. Seal was no longer able to calculate or anything. She could only think of one thing. Must notify Lord Rimuru immediately. Less than warning. Master, you need to stay away from individual Shido now. Greater than. Rimuru Pav. As soon as she heard Ciel's warning, Rimuru looked at Shido. He seemed to see Rimuru looking at him, so he looked back with a puzzled face. Shido didn't have any hostile actions, and that made Rimuru confused. But then, Rimuru realized. The AST team surrounding them had already begun to move. Rimuru immediately stood up from the bench and jumped back to keep her distance from Shido. Rimuru's actions took him by surprise. Chaos. From Rimuru's right hand, a small light emitted, forming a katana sword, and as the light faded, Rimuru angle less than chaos greater than could be seen in her hand. Rimuru stood facing Shido who was completely confused by what was going on. But before he could even finish his sentence, a voice came from afar. Shido. Rimuru looked toward the source of the sound. A small girl with white hair and angry eyes was rushing towards Rimuru. Origami wait. Shido shouted, but the white-haired girl didn't stop. With a sharp gaze, Rimuru firmly grasped chaos and prepared for what was to come.